Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunati Ravanachari Yamunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunati Ravanachari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Asatara Sadashri Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai Mathura Dhama Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai Ganga Maya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachani Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pasvachadi Shatani Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Satdutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Vanchakalpa Chibischa Kripasindadevacha Patitanam Pavaneyo Vaishnadevayo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So it's October 11th, 2024 in Radhadesh in Belgium. And we're going to be reading the third verse of the Catur Sloki, which is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 35. And it is also Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, 1 text 55. Yata mahanti bhutani bhutekshuka vacheshvatvanu pratistanya pravishtani tatateshu nateshvaham. By the way, you see a very common Sanskrit construction here with yata, tata. Yata, tata. You see, because, therefore. So like if, then. Like in English we say, if this, then this. So in Sanskrit you often find this yata, tata. Those of you who studied Manashiksha in the 8th verse, there's a yata, 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 then tata. So you'll see this grammatical construction all the time. Yata. Just as. Mahanti. The universal. Bhutani. Elements. Bhuteshu ucha avachesu. In the minute and gigantic. Anu. After. Pravishtani. Entered. Apravishtani. Not entered. Tata. So. Teshu. In them. Na. Not. Teshu. In them. Aham. Myself. Srila Prabhupada's translation in the Bhagavatam is, O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created and at the same time I am outside of everything. Srila Prabhupada's translation in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. And I also want to read Bhanu Swami's translation. Just as the elements enter into all beings and also remain separate, I enter into all beings and remain separate when I perform my pastimes. In pastimes related to the material world, I remain detached, and in pastimes related to devotees, I am attached. So our acharyas say that this particular verse is an expansion of a verse that the Lord spoke to Brahma right before speaking the Catur Sloki. So this is text 31, where be that? It's not that one. Oh, now I have lost it. I wrote down it was 31. Oh yes, it is 31. Okay. So in 31, I was bewildered by the Sunday. In 31, in the third line, we have Sarahasyam. With Rahasyam. And Rahasya means a mystery. So in these purports, in the Bhagavatam purport, there's 13 times Srila Prabhupada uses the word mystery. 3 times he uses the word mysterious. And 1 time in the Chaitanya Charitamrita purport, he uses the word mysteries. So altogether you have 17 times with both purports together that he's using some form of the word mystery, which was related to the word Rahasyam. And with the idea that this verse is revealing to Brahma the mysteries that Krishna said he would reveal in text 31. So text 31, I will tell you all the mysteries, and that's being taught in this verse. So before we read anything of the purport, can anyone tell me what core Siddhantic principle this is about? Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. Just like there's air inside your body, but there's air outside, so Krishna is in everything, and yet he's separate from everything. So of course, Srila Prabhupada already talked about this a lot with the first verse, which the Sanskrit of the first verse was just talking about the Before the creation, there's only I. During the creation, there's only I. After the creation, there's only I. So that first verse is only talking about the with Chinta Beta Beta Tattva. It's only talking about the or oneness and difference. The first verse was only talking about the oneness. But Srila Prabhupada ends up talking a lot about the difference. Using what word that was in the first verse? That was there twice. It is only I that exists before, only I that exists now, only I that exists afterwards. Which Sanskrit word? Aham. So by focusing on the Sanskrit word aham, Prabhupada talked mostly about the difference. By the way, why is it when the Shastras talk mostly about the oneness or about both, does Srila Prabhupada concentrate on the difference?
For us not to take it wrongly that everything is God.
But everything is God, so that wouldn't be wrongly, my dear.
I am God.
To stress personalism. To stress personalism.
To stress personalism, yes, because his mission is nirvisesha shunyavadi, to stress personalism. Does this mean that the oneness is untrue? No. So we should keep that in mind. Srila Prabhupada, when there's ever a verse that just talks about oneness, he'll always bring in, or almost always bring in, the difference. Okay, the second verse was about the appearance of difference. Whatever appears to be a value, if it's without relation to me, has no reality. Know it to be my illusory energy, that reflection, which appears to be in darkness. So the second verse was about, if you think there's a difference, then you're in Maya. That is Maya. The very definition of Maya is if you see anything of value without relationship to Krishna, if you see a separation. So then the question can be, well, is there any real type of separation? So the answer here is given in this verse. Yes, there is also a real type of difference. And that difference is that the Lord is everywhere, and yet he also retains his separate identity. So this verse further clarifies the first two verses. If you just took the verses without commentary. Everybody following me? First verse, I'm everything. Everything is me. There's only me. Second verse, if you think there's anything that's not connected with me, you're in illusion. And if that's all you had, you would only end up with oneness. Just at least by the literal meaning of the words. So then you come to this verse, hey, but I'm also haven't entered. I'm also not there. There's the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Mayam tatamidam sarvam jagadavyaktamurtina matstani sarvabhutani nataham te svavastitaha. That I'm not there. And that's one of the verses that we would teach to our Gurukul students. And I remember one time teaching this verse and talking about it, how Krishna says, everything's my energy, but I'm not there. And then we took a break, and two 6-year-old students were arguing. They said, I don't think Mother Urmila understands Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna is in everyone's heart, and she just told us that he's not there. And so... All right, so again, we don't have time to read the whole Bhagavatam purport. We can read the whole CC purport, and I'd like to do that. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combine with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop. So there Prabhupada's talking about Krishna as the what? He's talking about unless Krishna enters the universe, it couldn't develop. So he's talking about Krishna as the engine, the source. We have a word we use all the time. Starts with an S. Super soul. Padam Atma, the super self. Super soul. So like Queen Kunti says, oh, personality of the form of the universe, oh soul of the universe. She says, oh soul of the universe, oh personality of the form of the universe. So Krishna is the universal soul. Prabhupada says we're all cells in the body of the universe. There's one soul for the universe. That's Krishna. And we are all little souls within that body. Like I'm the big soul in this body. But all the little cells in my body are also alive. Yes? They have their own little lives. They do. I mean, my skin cells, my muscle cells, my stomach cells, my brain cells, they have their own little lives. They're doing their own eating, their own sleeping, their own respiration, their own reproduction. Yes? And I would hazard an educated guess that they probably have no idea that I exist. They probably don't realize that they're part of a comprehensive mechanism that has a predominant soul, namely myself. So similarly, in the universe, we're going about our business and as part of the universal body, generally completely unaware that we're part of a complete mechanism where there's a predominant soul, namely God. But he's also the body of the universe. So I am not this body. I am separate from this body. But Krishna is also his form. So he is the soul of the universe, and he is also the universe itself, as he explained in the first verse. Okay, without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop, just as without the presence of the spirit soul within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as, what did we already say? Super soul, or Paramatma. The personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature Paramatma, enters every entity from the biggest to the most minute. Now this is something like we're in this body, we're the big important soul in this body, and our influence pervades all the cells of the body, doesn't it? Right? If I get a stomach ache, I feel that. My consciousness is there in the cells of my stomach, although they're all individual living entities. I can feel something of what they're going through. There's one super soul, but the super soul is also pervading and within every living being, and also within every atom. So even within matter, we already talked about this, how like my hair and the ends of my nails are dead, but I have some awareness of them, even though they have no awareness of themselves. So the Lord's consciousness is spread throughout the material universe, within the bodies of all living beings like us, and within this microphone stand as well. Yes?
Does that mean that the material energy is not conscious of the supersoul?
The material energy is not conscious of itself, but Krishna is the consciousness of the material energy. The material energy has a consciousness. God is conscious of it. It's part of his body. But it cannot be aware of itself. So the living part of my fingernail has an awareness of itself. Those cells that are alive, they have some awareness, I am alive. On some level, they have some awareness like that. But the dead fingernails, the dead part, does not. But I have an awareness of both.
So there's really a lot of non-consciousness in the material energy.
But there isn't ultimately any non-consciousness in the material energy because Krishna has his consciousness of everything. So in one sense, Sarva Kalamidam Brahman, Vasudevam Sarvamiti, everything is alive. Because everything, all matter, is part of Krishna's there. It's part of him, and he's alive. But it's not conscious of itself separately because it's not a jiva. Is that clear? Yes? Just like you're conscious of the dead part of your nails. Like I gave the example of these people who have these, I don't know why they have them, but they have these very, very long nails, which I'm a practical person. I can't imagine why anybody would want that. But, you know, and you'll see them, they have their phones and they can't, like I can use the ends of my fingers to type. They can't do that because they have these nails. So they have these, and they can type very fast with their 1 inch, how much is an inch, 2 point something centimeter nails on the end of their fingers, and they can, because they're conscious of the nails. Yes, they have an awareness. When Prabhupada talked about women both taking care of their families and doing devotional service, he compared that to, he said, just like the woman who's taking care of her household, she doesn't neglect her hair. That don't neglect one thing for another. Right? That while you're cleaning your house, you don't neglect your hair. That was Prabhupada's metaphor. So we are also aware of our hair, yes? Those of us who have more than a very small amount of it. Right? You have very little of it, but those of us who have like some actual hair, we have some awareness. Right? I was giving a class in Brazil, and my translator had quite a bit of hair, thick and long hair, and somehow the way she had arranged it that morning wasn't working. So any of you ladies who have hair, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, and it kept coming out of the arrangement. You know, and there were sannyasis in the room, and she was very, like, she was trying to translate while she was trying to figure out what to do with her hair that kept coming. I mean, sometimes it happens to me while I'm giving a class, like the clip loosens or something, and then I have this hair, and then I'm kind of... So my point is, we have some awareness of the parts of our body that are not aware of itself. Yes? And that's different from my awareness of you. I have awareness of you only outside of you. Yes?
But isn't material energy represented also as a Durga Devi or in a form of Devata? So
Yes, so there is also, do you want to add another level of complexity to this? So yes.
there is a jiva
You wanted to take something also very complex and make it even more complex. So, yes. Is she a jiva? Is she Shakti? Durga Devi is an expansion of Lakshmi Devi. So she's the energy. So yes, you can explain it like that. That she's Krishna's energy, and he's aware of her because he's aware of energy.
And she's aware of herself.
And she's also aware of herself. So yes, you could say that also. But that doesn't mean like this microphone stand doesn't have independently as a microphone stand any awareness of itself or any desire. If I decide not to use it, it's not disappointed. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if I said to somebody, you know, would you bring me flowers from my puja? And then I say, nah, I don't need them. They might feel disappointed. They might feel, oh, I thought I could do some service and now I can't do that service anymore. They might feel sad. But if I take the microphone out of the stand and hold it in my hand and put the microphone off to the side, the microphone has no sadness involved in it at all. It's not like, oh, I didn't get you this for the class. Or, you know, when you turn off your computer, it's not like, you're not paying attention to me anymore. And I know that our machines sometimes seem to have a mind of their own. Like they don't always do exactly what we tell them to do. Right? But then we become very disturbed. Like the other day, my computer wouldn't properly turn off. And immediately I was in anxiety and I had to call the repair people and say, what do I do? How do I get my computer to work? You know, you expect that you have a machine and you say do this and it does this, and don't do this and it doesn't do that, and it obeys you without question, and that it doesn't have any independent desires. So that's not true with living entities. If you treat a living entity like that, then you're a demon. That's one of the definitions of evil. That I see another living being as an extension of my own desires, and I don't consider or permit them to have any desires of their own. That's part of the mentality of abusers, by the way. You exist just to meet my needs, and you have no boundaries. You have no needs, you have no desires, you have no feelings. You only exist for my pleasure. So that is, you follow? Yeah, so that's a difference between a living entity. Of course, when we see that the so-called matter is also part of the body of God, then we also see that in one sense there is a desire even in matter, but that's a desire of Krishna. It's not the desire of the matter itself. So Krishna does have some desire about how we use the microphone stand, but the microphone stand itself has no desire. Is that all right? Does Durga Devi have some desire? Yeah, definitely. She also wants her energy to be used in Krishna's service. And how exactly that works, I don't know. I'm sorry. That's beyond my pay grade. Okay. I hope someday I'll figure that out. It would be cool to figure that out. His existence, the supersoul, can be realized by one who has a single qualification of submissiveness. Now that's interesting because we often talk about what's the only qualification. And sometimes we'll say, what are some other answers if we could give to this? Eagerness. Eagerness. Excellent. Srila Rupa Goswami says that. Only qualification is eagerness. What else could we say? Only qualification is? Faith. What else? Surrender. Enthusiasm, like eagerness. Dedication. Love. Right? So it's interesting that there'll be many statements saying, this is all you need. Now that doesn't mean they're all contradictory. It means they're all true. That any one of them is sufficient. If you just have full faith, if you just have full surrender, if you just have full eagerness, if you just have full love, that's sufficient. So here, it's anyone who has the single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. So submission leading to surrender. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization. So how submissive we are, that's how realized we are. By which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man face to face. By the way, it's fascinating to me that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, that the majority of those adherents are more or less or in various ways impersonal. But it says in Exodus that Moses spoke to God face to face as a man speaks to another man. Which is exactly what Prabhupada is saying here. One can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man face to face. So, if they tell you that in their tradition God has no face, you can tell them, I'm sorry, that's not actually what's in your tradition. But just like we had Sankaracharya go through the Vedas and reinterpret everything impersonally, so they also had various persons who did that. You know, it was Maimonides or the Ramban who went through the whole Old Testament and all the Jewish tradition and reinterpreted everything impersonally. At the time he did that, he was considered a heretic. And he was rejected. And later, they changed and they accepted him as the main acharya. And he actually transformed the whole tradition, which of course also affected Christianity. So though in Christianity they accept that Jesus is a person who has a face, they have this idea that God is kind of faceless. And of course the Muslims completely think like that. The Muslims are very, very, very extreme impersonalists. That God has no form, that God has no face, that God has no person. Although they accept the Bible. So the Muslims accept the Bible as holy scripture, but still they have this very extreme. Now this is very important what Prabhupada is going to say in this paragraph as relates to the commentaries of previous acharyas. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. Now listen to how Prabhupada is going to describe this. This is unusual. If we think about the verse with Ambarish Maharaj, Vaimana Krishna Padara Vindayo, which is interesting. We were reading that verse after Mangalarti, I think it was yesterday. There was a reference to that about how Mauna means only talking about Krishna. Was that yesterday? Yes? right? And I was thinking about, Prabhupada gave the example of Maharaj Ambarish, and I thought, Maharaj Ambarish is a king. As a king, he could not possibly just be talking directly about Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes in the spiritual world. He would have to say, you know, okay, what's happening with our border over there? And have you been dealing with the uprising of those people? And are there people complaining in that town over there? And what's going on with the treasury? He'd have to do that. So it was very interesting that Prabhupada was giving him as an example of someone who only talked about Krishna. Because he's only talking about Krishna because he sees everything in relation to Krishna. He sees Krishna everywhere. Just like we have Bhishma, one of my favorite verses. And that man who spoke on thousands of subjects with thousands of meanings and fought on thousands of battlefields with thousands of men, now stopped speaking and fixed his wide open eyes on the personality of Godhead who stood before him with golden garments that glittered and shined. And I might be messing up one or two of the words. So this idea that, you know, one can engage in so many things but always be seeing Krishna. And Prabhupada usually talks about Maharaj Ambarish, says that first in the Bhagavatam, how he was using all of his senses, right? How he was using all of his senses in the service of the Lord. Now listen how Prabhupada's going to talk about it here. All his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. This is just straight from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this verse. But how Prabhupada gives it his own flavor. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Sri Radha and Krishna, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavana. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. Okay, we do not, as I've been telling you, have time to read the whole Bhagavatam purport, which is why I've been asking you to read these also on your own. So Prabhupada's talking about in the beginning about how the Lord has entered into the body of everything, and at the same time the elements are outside the body. And he's quoting two verses from the Brahma Samhita, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bis, and the verse that I was quoting the last couple days, Ekopi Sarajaitam Jagananda Koti. Then he talks about how the impersonalists cannot imagine that the Supreme Lord can be all-pervading and yet have a personal form. He says here that those with transcendental love can without difficulty see the personality of Godhead in every atom and every movable or immovable object. At the same time, he can see the personality of Godhead in his abode, Goloka, enjoying eternal pastimes with his eternal associates, who are also expansions of his transcendental existence. This vision is the real mystery of spiritual knowledge, as explained by the Lord in the beginning. Sa rahasya tad angam cha, which was text 31 that I quoted, this word rahasya. This mystery is the most confidential part of the knowledge of the Supreme. And he's saying that people can't discover it through mental speculation. Prabhupada, how many times did I say? Does anyone remember? 17 times altogether. He says mystery or mysterious or mysteries. Yeah, the last sentence here is, if one is fortunate enough to have received the knowledge in the transcendental disciplic succession, surely he will have the chance to understand the mystery of the Lord and that of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the sound incarnation of the Lord. Now there's also a place here where Prabhupada's talking about television. And I don't know if I can find it. I don't think I can find it easily. Prabhupada's talking about how it's like a television transmitted to the heart of the devotee. Okay. So, we struggle with illusion, yeah? We all struggling with illusion? As explained in the previous verse, this tendency to see things separately from the Lord, this tendency to have an exploitive mentality, And I'm sure that any of us who've been practicing spirituality for some time, you know, in the beginning we might have thought it would be extremely easy. Yes, you know, I just thought if I'm a super, super, super fanatical, strict devotee, then it will be very easy. No, that didn't work. You know, felt like a crazy fanatic. You know, and we think like we get rid of things. You know, I get rid of some attachments, some this and that, and it seems to come back, yeah? Or you notice you have it in a more subtle form. Like you've gotten rid of the gross form of it, and then it shows up in a more subtle form. And it amazes me how much attachment I have in various subtle forms. It just like, wow, my motive for that is that, my motive for that is that, my motive for that is that. And now if we try to become detached from all of our ill motives and all of our attachments, are we going to be successful?
That's into Krishna. That's into Krishna.
By attachment to Krishna, yeah. What does Krishna compare all of our attachments to in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter? Oh, a calf's footprint? Oh, that's in the 10th canto, chapter 2 and chapter 14. And one of my favorite philosophical points, but you're jumping ahead.
Branches on tree.
Branches of a tree. What kind of tree?
Banyan tree.
A banyan tree. How many of you have ever seen a real live banyan tree?
It's just there.
You have one? You have a real live one? Like a growing one?
Yeah.
You do? In a pot. You have a banyan tree in a pot? A banyan tree in a pot? How big is your pot?
It's going to take care of
My God, Krishna, you can't grow banyan. If you've ever seen a real banyan, they take everything over. And they wouldn't grow outside here, right? It's too cold. So you keep it in a pot. That poor tree. Oh my God, you're constantly cutting off its arms and legs. Right? And have you ever seen a real banyan tree? Like, how are you going to cut down a banyan tree? It would be at least a very well-established Indian one. The Chinese ones are not, they're not as expensive. But for the Indian ones, you know, it would be a lot of work. They can cover a whole acre, you know, they can spread everywhere. They're So material attachments is like that. It's like this very complicated banyan tree. You can't even tell where it begins. A really established one, not one in a pot. I'm growing banyan tree in a pot. A really well-established one, you can't find out the original root. It's got so many roots coming down from everywhere. The first trunk, you can't figure it out anymore. And so trying to cut it down is almost impossible. Right? And then Krishna says, with the sword of knowledge, just cut through this. Which always reminds me of Alexander the Great, when he was told that anyone who could untie the Gordian knot could conquer the world. And no one had ever been able to figure it out. And he just took a sword and cut it. So it is a weapon of detachment, but we're not interested just in detachment, because trying to establish just detachment, Krishna says klesho, it's very difficult. And it's almost impossible, because by nature, we're in relationship. By nature, we do not exist separately from relationship. Like these people who want to posit that we're not intrinsically persons, that we have the potential to become a person, like Darwin kind of claims, that matter can become alive, but that we're not intrinsically persons. So if we're not intrinsically persons, we don't intrinsically have any relationship with anything. I guess we're just floating something. So because we're naturally, our natural situation is to have some sort of relationship, it's very difficult for us to just be completely detached. It's very unnatural, and therefore Prabhupada talks about how the impersonalists, even after achieving Brahman realization, that they often fall down. Avasuddha buddhiya, their intelligence is not yet pure. Why? Because they want relationships. And I was staying at one devotee's house who had a very interesting book. I read the last half of the book. And then I ended up watching a video interview with the author. It was about an Indian woman living in Singapore. She was a very spiritual person, but she was impersonalist. She believed ultimately that everything is impersonal. So she got cancer, and she died in the hospital from cancer. And her cancer had advanced to the point that she had complete organ failure. All of her organs failed, including her skin. So, you know, her skin wasn't everything. And this happened in a hospital. Okay. Her husband was there, medical staff was there, completely medically documented, which was why she was able to sell a lot of her book, because it was very well documented. So she left her body, and when she left her body, she had this kind of merging experience. Now, it must not have been completely Brahman. There must have been some aspect of Paramatma in her experience. Because she said once she was out of her body that she felt that she was everyone and everyone was her. She said that anyone that she thought about, she was immediately that person, and she could immediately understand them, and she was just everything. And she felt great peace and great happiness beyond material happiness. And she said, but in that state, I missed relationships. She said, I decided that I would rather have the illusion of separateness and have a relationship with my husband as an illusion than have this concept of being one with everything. And so she came back in her body. And the reason it became so famous is within 2 weeks she was completely 100% cured. So that's why it happened in a hospital, and it was completely, you know, it wasn't like just somebody saying something. So she became very, very famous. And she wrote this book. So I didn't read it. I read just the second half of the book, like from her near-death experience onward. And I thought, this is exactly what Srila Prabhupada is talking about. Exactly what Prabhupada is talking about. I read another not empirically documented testimony of a similar thing, of someone who had achieved impersonal realization and was, you know, constantly in Brahman consciousness and feeling that I am everything, everything is me, we're all one. And then he said, after a while, I wanted again to experience an illusion of separateness so that I could have relationships with other people. And I thought, that is exactly what Prabhupada says happens. You know, we're naturally in relationship. We're anandamaya vyasat. We naturally want to enjoy, and we want to enjoy through relationships, even if it's relationships with objects, even relationship with food or something. You know? And therefore, just trying to be detached is extremely difficult. It's actually unnatural. And even if we succeed at it, like these persons succeeded at it, we tend not to like it. We tend to go, I don't like being completely detached. So, of course, we should cultivate detachment along with attachment, but that detachment should be cultivated with attachment. Something like a person who gets married, the idea of marriage is you're now detached from having a romantic relationship with anyone else. But the basis of that is your attachment to your spouse. If you're just going around going, she's not really pretty, she's not really pretty, that's probably not going to work, because probably one of those people at least probably is pretty. But if you're actually attached to your spouse, then it's much easier. Everybody, this makes sense? Right? Or if you have a job that you like and you're constantly not job hunting. If you're miserable in your work, that's something else. But if you have a job that you enjoy, you're not even looking for another job. Like, I enjoy this job. And if someone comes and says, you know, would you like to do what? I'm happy where I am. I don't need something else. So yes, we should definitely cultivate detachment as part of our attachment to Krishna. As part of our attachment to Krishna. We therefore cultivate detachment from seeing things separately from him. All right, so I want to focus on this mystery of attachment to Krishna. And I'm sorry I couldn't find where it talks about spiritual television, but it does say that, having the vision within. Did you find it? Yes, can you read it? I know it's in this purport, which I read in preparation for this class like 3 or 4 times.
Okay, that's the mic.
Mike.
The man with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand, although by material science one can see things far away by means of television. Factually, the spiritually developed person is able to have the television of the kingdom of God always reflected within his heart. That is the mystery of knowledge of the personality of Godhead.
Thank you. And again, did you hear mystery?
Mystery.
Yeah, so that's what Prabhupada was talking about with how you're seeing Radha Krishna on the throne and you're smelling their fragrance. That's being transmitted to the heart via spiritual television. Just like right now in this room, there's definitely radio signals and television signals, correct? They're going through this room. And if you had a TV set or a radio, you'd pick it up. Just like there's Wi-Fi signals, and if you have a phone that's connected, you can pick it up. So in the same way, Krishna's pastimes are always, although he is separate, they're actually always here, and it's a question of whether or not we can pick it up. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada also makes the point in the Bhagavatam purport that Lord Brahma's desires are all spiritual and they're also all fulfilled. And he also talks about this as a mystery. That how is it that he has all spiritual desires and they're all fulfilled? One of our frustrations, at least for me, in this world, is that so many of my desires are not fulfilled. Yes? Do any of you have this frustration? You know, that so many things that I want, and things I want that appear that I should be able to get. Yeah? It seems like, okay, it's right there. I can see it. You know, I should be able to, and somehow I just can't get it. Just doesn't work. Or I get it and then I'm like, no, that wasn't what I wanted. It looked like that, and when I got it, no, that's not what I wanted. It wasn't really my desire. Or I get it and I'm like, wow, I got exactly what I want, and then I lose it. I forget it somewhere, or it gets old, it falls apart. I mean, this is true, at least again in my life, which does simple, mundane things like shoes that fit and aren't leather and can easily be put off and on, as you're a Hare Krishna devotee who has to put your shoes off and on 10 million billion times a day. You know, so just something like that. It's I don't know, I have funny sized feet, and it's a very hard thing for me to get. And if I get it and I say, yes, the perfect shoe, then the company stops making it. Or something. So it's very difficult for me to, you know, it's a mystery. How is it that his desires are all fulfilled? Now, the reason our desires aren't all fulfilled is because our desires are often not spiritual. They're often intrinsically selfish. And therefore, the fulfillment of my desires is going to clash with the fulfillment of other people's desires. If all of us had all of our desires fulfilled, some of those desires would cause harm to others and mess up their desires. So in this world, we're allowed to work for our desires. We have to accumulate the karma to get our desires fulfilled. And then Krishna, somehow or other, has that all work together like some sort of a puzzle. That each of us can have our desires fulfilled that are according to our karma, and the fulfillment of our desires doesn't mess up the fulfillment of other people's desires, because he puts that all together in terms of karma, and he staggers it in different lifetimes and moves different living entities around in different lifetimes, so everybody gets what they've earned without messing up what anybody else has earned. But then, of course, our desires don't satisfy us. Even the so-called perfect things in our life don't fully satisfy us. So if our desires are aligned with Krishna, and Prabhupada talks about how you put a rock in water, and if you put the rocks in all different places, the circles clash, whereas if you throw all the rocks in the same place, the circles are concentric. This, of course, is also inconceivable because each devotee, each pure devotee, has a variety of desires that do appear to conflict with those of other pure devotees. You know, some cowherd boys like to argue with Krishna, and some cowherd boys like to be submissive with Krishna, and that may seem to be also a conflict. Or the cowherd boys want to play with Krishna, and he sneaks off to go be with the gopis. And the cowherd boys say, where's Krishna? We want him to be with us. And the gopis are like, oh, no, we want him to be with us. You know, and meanwhile, Mother Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj are crying back in the village where Krishna's in the forest. We want him to be with us. And then when Krishna leaves the forest and goes back in the village, then the deer are crying. And the trees in the forest are crying. We want Krishna to be with us. I mean, Kunti was bewildered by this. She's like, okay, I'm attached to my paternal family. I'm attached to my father and mother's family. I'm also attached to my husband's family, but they live in different places. And I want Krishna to be with both my birth family and my marital family, and I don't know what to do. So Krishna, just sever my attachment to all of them. Just break my attachment to everybody, because I'm just stuck here in this attachment of you should be here or you should be there. So it may seem like that they're also contradictory because we're individual, but they're not. Krishna makes sure that all of his devotees are satisfied, and this meeting and separation is actually part of the relish. It's part of the enjoyment. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami takes each rasa and describes it in terms of meeting and separation. So when Krishna's in the village, the forest deer in separation are experienced as much or more ecstasy as they do when Krishna's with them in the forest. And Mother Yasoda, when Krishna's in the forest and she's in separation, is experiencing as much or more ecstasy as when Krishna's in the village. So all these desires are actually all able to be fulfilled, and they're not actually conflicting with one another. There's a kind of harmony. Okay, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has this purport, which is, as far as I can tell, the basis. Stay there. Stay there. I have all these notes everywhere. As far as I can tell, is actually the basis of Srila Prabhupada's last paragraph in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, the entrance of the elements into the living beings is without attachment, since the elements are not conscious. Like the ether, though I am conscious, like a man who lives in his house without attachment. I remain without attachment while entering, regulating, and protecting all beings. My pastimes are without attachment in relationship to the elements and the living beings within the material world. So Krishna is there neutral. As a super soul, he's neutral. You want to do something sinful and go to hell? Fine, I'll give you that intelligence. You want to do something pious and go to heaven? Fine, I'll give you that intelligence. Whatever intelligence you want, you can have. I'm there as the neutral witness. I'm a friend, Krishna's saying. I'm a friend, but I'm a neutral witness. So that's, I enter and I have not entered in terms of the material world. Okay, now we're looking at I enter and I have not entered in terms of the spiritual. But I desire to show myself to my obedient devotees who have entered my heart. It has this word obedient, which I think Srila Prabhupada has picked up on in his word what? Submissive. But I desire to show myself to my obedient devotees who have entered my heart, who have perfected themselves and bowed to me, remaining separate, not entering their heart. I desire to offer my beauty to their eyes. I desire that my fragrance enters their nostrils, and desire to fill their ears with the nectar of my sweet voice, speaking with them and answering them. I desire to make their limbs experience the sweet softness of my body by touching and embracing them. Thus situated inside my devotees and externally as well, I perform pastimes with great attachment for my pure devotees beyond the gunas who I cannot give up. So in reading this, I'm struck with the fact that Krishna wants us to enjoy him. He doesn't want us to try to enjoy his energy separately from him, exploiting him. He wants us to enjoy him directly, personally, and he wants to offer himself for our enjoyment. So also by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is Madhurya Kadambini. If you have not read this book, please do yourself a favor and read this book. It's only about this thick. It's a very, very small book. You could read it in an afternoon. And it's explaining Shraddha to Prema. So this is in the section on Prema. The Lord first reveals his beauty, Saundarya, to the eyes of the utterly astonished devotee. The sweetness of his beauty makes all the senses and the mind become like eyes to see the Lord. The resulting symptoms of ecstatic love, such as tears, shivering, and being stunned, cause the devotee to swoon in ecstasy. To revive him, the Lord next reveals his fragrance, Saurabhya, to the nostrils of his devotee. And all the devotee's senses and mind take on the quality of the nose to smell. As the devotee starts to swoon a second time, the Lord says, "Oh, my devotee, I am fully under your control. Please don't be disturbed. Just realize me to your full satisfaction." The Lord thus discloses his pleasing voice, so Suvarya, to the ear of his devotee. And as before, all the senses become like ears to hear. As his devotee swoons a third time, the Lord mercifully gives him the touch of his lotus feet, hands, or chest, revealing his delicate softness, so Kamarya, according to the different rasas of the devotees. To those in servitude, he touches his lotus feet to their heads. To those in the mood of friendship, he grasps their hands. For those in the mood of parental affection, he gives the touch of his hands by wiping away their tears. For those in conjugal mood, he awards his tender softness by embracing them to his heart with his long arms. Again, the devotee's senses all take on the sense of touch to feel his softness. At the start of the fourth swoon, the Lord restores him by giving his fifth madhurya, the taste of the nectar of his lips, Saurasya. By this he reveals only to those who at that time are in the mood of conjugal love and desire this, but not to others. The devotee's senses all take on the sense of taste, and he faints for a fifth time. This blissful swoon is so deep that the Lord can revive him only by bestowing his sixth quality, Odarya. Odarya refers to the state where all the Lord's qualities, beauty, fragrance, sound, touch, and taste, forcefully manifest at once to the devotee's various senses. Now, by the way, if you felt bad for the non-conjugal devotees who didn't get to taste the Lord, please don't, because everyone gets to taste the Lord in the form of prasadam, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says the wonderful taste of prasadam is the taste of the Lord's mouth, which is why prasadam tastes extraordinarily better than its material ingredients. You've had this experience? Yes? So the Lord wants, his greatest pleasure is for us to feel pleasure at him. Now, this is why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was praying for ecstasy. When will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? When will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? And Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj says, well, this sounds very selfish. Like, when am I going to feel ecstasy? But he says, no, it's not. It's a manifestation of love. Think about the greatest gift that somebody can give to us. What's the greatest thing someone can do for us?
Money.
Money. That's actually not true. It's actually not true. And there are several reasons why it's not true. First of all, the money may have strings attached. They may be giving you money because they want something. Second of all, money is useless in and of itself. If you just have a whole bunch of money, it has absolutely no value to you at all. You have to spend it on something. And if you already have the things that money can buy, money has no value to you. If you already had security and you already had peace and you already had pleasures and you already had freedom, which are the kind of things, and status, which is what we want money for, you wouldn't need money at all. Is that clear? But money in and of itself, it really isn't very important. It's important in terms of what it gets us. So no, the greatest thing that someone can give you is that they feel joy by your existence. This is the main reason people want dogs. I mean, they may also want a dog as an excuse to go out and get exercise, but I don't think that's so true anymore. I mean, when I was growing up, people didn't like walk or jog for exercise. And so if you wanted to go and take a walk regularly, you pretty much had to have a dog with you. But people mostly want a dog so that when they come home, the dog is, oh, I'm so happy to see you. And I tell the story of how we had slugs in our garden. Do you all know what slugs are? They're like snails without shells, and they just devastate a garden. And I could not get rid of them. And then I read that ducks eat slugs. So I bought a couple of ducks. They ate this, I mean, they were so thorough in their eating of the slugs that even after we gave them away to a teaching farm where they wouldn't be killed, we had no slugs for the next 5 years. They're like, completely got rid of the slugs. And somehow they got very attached to my husband. I have no idea why. He didn't do anything for them. It was only the kids and I who did anything for these ducks. But they just fell in love with him. And when he would come home from work, we were around a corner. So when his vehicle was like around the corner and 2 blocks down the other street, they could tell the sound of his vehicle. And as soon as it was like 2.5 blocks away, they would waddle over to the gate and they would be like, quack, 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 quack. And he was so thrilled whenever he came home. I don't know if as his wife I ever gave him quite as enthusiastic as a reception as he got from the ducks. I would have had to have flower petals and musical instruments or something. I don't think I ever did that. So, he'd come home and he'd be greeted and he would just beam. The ducks are greeting me. So this is ultimately what we want. It's ultimately what we want. We want that people love us for ourselves, not for what we can do for them. And that they feel great joy just at seeing us. This is, we see someone we haven't seen for a long time. And, oh, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy to be with you. This is ultimately what we want. That we can be, and this is the ultimate spirituality, that I can be the catalyst for someone else's happiness. Prabhupada says the difference between spiritual and material is I'm happy at others' happiness. And material is I'm happy at others' unhappiness. So if I'm the catalyst for someone's happiness, that is the ultimate spiritual happiness. The ultimate evil is I'm the cause of someone's misery. Think about some people who torture others. People who take delight in being, torturers for the mafia or something. That's the height of evil. I've caused you to suffer. This is why meat eating is so sinful. I'm the cause of this other living entity's suffering.
Is it?
It went somewhere, right?
On the bottom of your sari.
The bottom. Ah. Thank you. So, another interesting point in this regard, this is from 10:47:29. This is when Krishna is meeting the gopis. Where is Krishna going to be meeting the gopis? In chapter 47 of the 10th canto. It must be where? Kurukshetra. My dear gopis, just as the 5 material elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether are all pervading in this material world and present in the bodies of all living entities, in the same way, I am always present within you. I reside in your mind, senses, and your life breath, for I have taken shelter in all these places. Okay? So that should be our meditation. How can I get this spiritual television? Now, one thing I'd like to suggest that maybe we try to think about today is, what would I like to see in my spiritual television? What pastimes would I like to see? What would I like to be absorbed in? Srila Jiva Goswami says that the Lord enters our consciousness through the pathway of our meditation. That as we meditate on the Lord, He reciprocates with that. Lord Brahma says that the Lord takes whatever form we want to meditate on. So and Prabhupada says we can become perfect just by meditating on one pastime. We also have, in terms of Astanga Yoga, like Dhruv is meditating on the Lord within him, and he's getting this spiritual television in his heart. And then the Lord also appears outside of him. This is actually the 4th and 5th stages of meditation. The 4th stage of meditation, spiritual samadhi, as explained in Nectar of Instruction, text 8 purport, where Srila Prabhupada is quoting from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It's also explained in Harinam Chintamani and Jagabrahma by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's also explained by Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas, and it's also explained in little bits and pieces all over the place. So the fourth stage of spiritual samadhi is where we have the spiritual television, and the fifth stage is where Krishna appears to us face to face. So we should certainly be meditating on how Krishna is the world. We should be meditating on how Krishna is the world, so that we're always talking about Krishna, even if we're talking about filling up the tank of the car with gas, or even if we're talking about how much it's going to rain today, that actually we're always talking about Krishna. And we should also be meditating on Krishna in terms of his spiritual activities. I think, what activities do I want to meditate on? What pastimes do I want to meditate on? And then Krishna will be attracted. And at a certain point, he'll say, all right, I'll show those to you. I'll reveal those to you within your heart. So I think we have like 2 minutes. There's so much, I'm sorry, on these verses that it's difficult. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I know what else I wanted to do, actually, sorry. I wanted to look at my favorite Rahasyam verse, which is Bhagavad Gita 4:3. Saevayam maya teja yoga proktaha parantanaha bhaktosi me sakacheti rahasyam etad uttama. Because you're my devotee as well as my friend, therefore rahasyam, I will show you this mystery, how I can be everywhere and how I'm still separate, how I can have my pastimes in this world, where I enter this world, I am the world, I'm the soul of the world, and yet I'm detached, and how I have this spiritual pastimes that I enter the heart of my devotee and also show him all the aspects of my form in spiritual attachment. Is that all right? So we have our last verse tomorrow, the last verse of the Catur Sloki, of how this truth is universal, eternal, and transcontextual. So anything good in this class was from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas. Anything bad in this class was from me. Any mistakes are mine. So I hope that you can pick up the good and excuse the bad. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.